Some wounds wear silence like a second skin, not because they vanished, but because we've learned how to organize the chaos they leave behind. We color-code our suffering, give it schedules, therapies, even mantras, anything but a mirror, and in that reflection we dare not look too long because it does not show a scar mending, it shows a fracture rearranging itself into something that can function, something that can smile and say, "I'm better now," while somewhere beneath the surface the original scream still echoes without language. Real healing, the kind that reconfigures the soul, doesn't feel clean or linear. It doesn't feel like a morning affirmation or a downloadable guide. It feels like dying, not all at once, but in layers. Like realizing the version of you who survived wasn't supposed to last forever, and yet we keep patching that version. We keep painting over the broken parts with gold leaf, calling it kintsugi, pretending we're wiser now. But the truth, you didn't become gold. You became good at holding your pieces together just long enough not to fall apart in public. This isn't transformation, it's survival with better branding. And maybe that's what they wanted. Maybe the entire structure was built not to heal you, but to keep you functional. To teach you how to cope, not how to cleanse. To regulate your breath, not reawaken your origin. We are taught the mechanics of peace without ever touching its source. Taught to name our triggers but not reclaim the part of us that was stolen when those triggers first rooted in our flesh. We become fluent in management, not liberation. There is a ceremony that never ends. It's called pretending to be whole. You attend it every time you smile through a memory you've never let yourself truly feel. You bow to it each time you say, "I'm fine." When your nervous system is trembling like a haunted violin, the body remembers, even when the mouth forgets, and in that forgetting we shape a personality around pain, a mask that functions so well we convince ourselves it is our face. But there's something deeper than pain, something prior to trauma, something untouched, that thing beneath the thing. It's not your inner child, it's your inner ancient, the part of you that knew how to sing before language, the part that didn't just live through loss but wove it into a sacred rhythm. That's the part you stopped listening to when you started healing. Healing didn't begin when you started repairing. It began the moment you realized you were never broken in the way they said you were. And yet, look at how cleverly we replaced remembrance with routines. We began to chase safety rather than sovereignty. We gathered all the right tools but never once asked who we were before the need for tools began. Who were you before you became a project, a timeline, a case study in resilience? Sometimes, the deepest trauma isn't what happened to you. It's what you had to become to survive it. The personality you formed wasn't your identity, it was a strategy. And every time you optimize that strategy, you drift further from the original self it was built to protect. And here is the silent tragedy. We've fallen in love with our coping mechanisms. We've mistaken strength for suppression, control for peace, and numbness for wisdom. You've probably been told that time heals all wounds, but the soul does not measure time in hours or years. It measures in truths faced, in layers peeled back, in the sacred terror of remembering who you were before you were rearranged to be acceptable. You didn't become yourself, you became what survived. And now that version of you is tired, not just physically, but metaphysically. Tired of pretending that wholeness is another step on your calendar. Tired of navigating self-help labyrinths with no exit. You know there's something more, not outside you, but beneath all that was built on top of you. And that more isn't a new identity, it's a reversion, a sacred undoing. If you've ever felt that your healing feels like acting, you're not failing. You're remembering that real healing is not performance, not progress, not productivity. It is collapse. It is letting the version of you that adapted finally rest, so the one who remembers can finally rise. And when that collapse begins, it won't look like glory. It won't feel like light. It will feel like being erased from the inside, not by force, but by resonance, as if your very cells are shedding a version of reality that was never truly yours. The grief will not be loud. It will be quiet, like the moment between breaths when the body forgets how to inhale, and in that pause, something ancient stirs, not a memory but a knowing, not an answer but an echo. This is when the real healing begins, when you stop trying to become someone better, and instead start letting go of everyone you were trained to be. The archetype collapses. The story you inherited from pain burns in the fire of your remembrance, and what remains is not a new persona, it is a sacred vacancy, a space so empty it vibrates, a silence so full it sings. You will feel like you're dying. That's because you are, but not the kind of death that ends, the kind that reveals. It's the death of the scaffold, the removal of the spell. It's what happens when the mask rots away and all that's left is the raw pulse of what you were before language, before trauma, before time. And here's the paradox. In that moment, you won't feel powerful. You'll feel small, fragile, like a child with no defenses. But that child isn't broken. That child is sacred. And for the first time, you'll begin to see that every system, every structure, every healing method that asked you to be strong was asking you to bypass the only part of you that ever truly mattered. You were never meant to build strength around your wound. You were meant to let the wound take you back to the place before you were wounded. And that place, it doesn't look like a memory. It looks like light, a kind of golden presence that doesn't explain itself. It just pulses. And if you listen long enough, it will begin to rearrange you, not with force but with frequency. Let go of the idea that growth means adding more knowledge, more practice, more tools. Real growth is subtraction, peeling, dissolving, unbecoming, because only then can the original signal, the one you came in with, begin to re-emerge through the noise. You didn't forget yourself. You were overwritten, layer after layer, expectation after role, pain after adaptation, but the true self was never erased, only concealed, and now it's trying to surface, not as a new version, as the timeless version, the one that was paused, not destroyed. If you've been feeling exhausted by your own self-work, it's because the soul is done being worked on. It's ready to be remembered. It's ready to be restored to its original position, not beneath the trauma, but above the timeline. You've been healing like you're trying to repair a shipwreck while still underwater. What if the answer isn't rebuilding? What if the answer is surfacing, breaching the illusion, rising out of the hypnotic sea of self-improvement into the radical air of self-remembrance? But beware, the old patterns will whisper. The world will applaud your functionality. They'll reward your recovery. They'll tell you you're doing so well now, and it will feel good for a while. But deep inside, you'll still feel it, that quiet ache, that hum beneath the smile, the recognition that what they celebrate isn't healing, it's compliance. It's the return of a version of you they can understand. But the real you, the original essence, it doesn't seek to be understood. It seeks to be embodied. It seeks to dissolve the scripts. It seeks to be so honest, so untamed, that even you tremble in its presence. The you they applauded was a performance. The you that's awakening doesn't need an audience. This is where the healing ends, and the transfiguration begins. This is not about managing your damage, it's about returning to the dimension of you that never fractured. That self cannot be reached by logic, it cannot be built with routines, it can only be remembered in the silent chamber between thoughts, in the dream space behind the eyes. And maybe this whole time you weren't healing, maybe you were negotiating with the fragments, convincing them to stay in place a little longer, to perform their roles, to keep the peace. But what if peace was never the goal? What if the goal is wholeness, and wholeness doesn't always look peaceful? Sometimes it looks like collapse. Sometimes it looks like madness. Sometimes it looks like shedding everything you thought was you. And in that shedding, you finally feel air on skin that hasn't breathed in decades. You finally see through eyes that were hidden beneath layers of performance. And you hear something, not with your ears but with your origin. A soundless call, a homecoming that doesn't arrive. It awakens, and suddenly you're not healing anymore. You're remembering. And that remembrance doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with fanfare or flashes of spiritual grandeur. It enters like a whisper from the marrow, subtle, seismic, undeniable. You don't need to understand it. You just need to stop resisting the places it takes you. Because it will take you to everything you buried. It will walk you through every mask you made lovable. It will burn through every behavior that once made you safe. And it will ask you, not with words but with essence, do you want to be healed or do you want to be real? Healing asks for progress, but reality asks for presence, and presence doesn't polish the past, it walks barefoot across it, letting every fragment of the old self cut what no longer belongs. If you still feel broken, even after the rituals, even after the years of shadow work, it's not because you failed. It's because healing is not the end. It's the doorframe. And some souls were never meant to stay in the hallway. They came to remember the rooms beyond, the sacred chambers of raw being, unfiltered truth, and sovereign embodiment. You are not a project. You are a prism. You are not meant to be rebuilt. You are meant to be revealed. And when the final layer falls, it will not feel like a triumph. It will feel like a death you can't explain. But something else will rise in its place. Not a new self, but an original current. The current that was hijacked the moment you were taught to earn your right to exist. The moment you were rewarded for betraying your essence. The moment you started mistaking adjustment for evolution. You adjusted to survive. But your soul did not come here to survive. It came to transmit, and that transmission is incompatible with the mask, with the managed damage, with the simulated self that smiles through grief and calls it growth. You weren't healing, you were rehearsing who they told you to be. When you stop rehearsing, you'll feel the trembling. It's not fear, it's the return of electricity to the parts that were frozen. It's the reawakening of the voice you silenced to keep the peace. It's the soul uncoiling from the pose it held for too long. Do not fear the trembling. It is your resurrection. It is your signal, and it cannot coexist with performance. It doesn't negotiate with palatable versions. It rises raw. It howls sometimes. It weeps without context, and it doesn't care if it makes sense, because sense was the language of the mask, but this is the language of remembering. You may lose people when you speak it. You may lose old dreams, old strategies, old routines that once felt like lifelines, but they weren't lifelines, they were illusions, they were rehearsals for someone else's applause. When you stop healing and start remembering, the applause stops, but so does the ache, because you're no longer living in fragments, you're no longer borrowing light, you become the frequency that no longer needs to prove itself. You become the embodiment of unbrokenness that never needed fixing. This isn't about becoming the highest version of you. That's still the language of separation. This is about collapsing the idea that there was ever a version of you that needed to climb. It's the moment you stop ascending and start dissolving. It's the return to center, not as a place, but as a pulse. A pulse that says, you never left, you just forgot how to feel it. Healing ends where remembrance begins. Now breathe. Not like a task, but like a reunion. Let the breath remind you of what never broke. Let it carry you past the stories, past the scars, past the identities that were never truly yours. Let the silence between your thoughts become a temple. Let the emptiness be holy. Let the ache be an altar. And let what rises from that space not be another performance, but the echo of your original name. You're not healing. You're remembering. You're not managing damage. You're exiting the illusion that damage was ever your identity. So let the rituals fall away. Let the programs dissolve. Let the mask rot in peace, and return, not as someone new, but as someone ancient. Now ask yourself without words, what was I before the wound? Then sit in the echo. That's where you begin. Welcome home.